Did you know that in some causes of death, the level of panic and terror can actually speed it up? Of course it can lead to bad judgment calls, but it's more than that. The body's response to that terror can accelerate loss of oxygen. That loss of oxygen can trigger an impending sense of doom. Before you know it, you are stuck in an intensifying cycle of dread that is feeding itself. We all have our own idea of what these scariest deaths are based on our own phobias and innate fears, but some deaths actually trigger panic and dread on a physiological level. That is true for so many on this list. I have 8 of some of the scariest deaths that you can face, along with what they might feel like. This content may be upsetting to some. Viewer discretion advised. The good news is that it usually takes extenuating circumstances to go overboard on a cruise ship. It could be due to careless choices trying to get a selfie, alcohol, being pushed, or even going willingly. Honestly, you might as well put yourself right into a lion's den because there are numerous things down in that water just waiting to take you off of the game board. The first immediate danger is deceleration. Cruise ships are built to house a lot of people, which means that they build up. Some of these drops can be upwards of 90 feet, and let me tell you that chilly water can feel more like cement if you hit it wrong. You can suffer traumatic head injuries or even ruptured organs. Imagine if it's nighttime, you'll be intoxicated by the pure pitch darkness. Another immediate threat is current. This jumbo ship displaces more water than you can imagine. You might find yourself in a bottomless wave pool, jostling you all around, daring you to exhaust yourself trying to stay above water. If you can't, you could get disoriented, slip under, and even find yourself underneath the ship, or worse, in the path of the up to 20-foot propeller. That will turn you into fish food in just a few blinks. If you get yourself to calmer waters, your nightmare will transform into a horror movie marathon. Without a flotation, it's up to you to stay afloat and tread water, which will slowly deplete your energy. Hell, it might deplete uber fast. This water might also be so flippin' cold that you can enter into stages of hypothermia in minutes. Your muscles will seize up and ache and burn, and you'll feel like you have to pee so bad. On top of all that, you might have to dodge jellyfish or even sharks. Sharks do tend to flock near cruise ships, scavenging for stray trashed food. All in all, this would be 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Imagine yourself so thirsty that you ache for cool, crisp water. You bring the glass to your lips, but the moment that the fluid hits your tongue, it unleashes a furious, squeezing agony inside of your gullet. It's like a hydraulic-powered vice is clamping down around your larynx, shooting bullets of cramping into your jaws and ears. It's so unrelenting that you throw the glass on the floor to get that water away from you. This is called hydrophobia, brought on by tonic throat spasms. You're experiencing late-stage rabies, and hope for survival is gone. Rabies is a virus spread by animal saliva with an incubation period of around 2 to 3 months. What's especially frightening is that once symptoms begin, it's nearly always fatal. Initially, you'll experience symptoms associated with many minor viruses like headache, fatigue, weakness, and body aches. Symptoms remain relatively minor for around 2 to 9 days, leading people to believe that they're just fighting a cold. It's after that point that things escalate quickly. The next stage is referred to as the acute neurologic period. The virus travels through your nerves to your spinal cord and brain where it quickly multiplies. Movement becomes incredibly labored due to muscle weakness, and clarity fades. People often snap in and out of delirium initially, and soon full body convulsions and severe agitation begins. Sometimes limbs become paralyzed before most of the body follows suit. Vivid hallucinations can run wild, leading you to feel as if you're living a long disjointed fever nightmare. This is the time when hydrophobia begins. Finally, the virus invades your salivary glands, turning you contagious. Now you're nearing the end. The throat spasms happen far more frequently, causing constant breakthrough pain, and you're producing more saliva, which is responsible for the hallmark foaming of the mouth. In total, it will take around 9 to 12 days for death to occur from onset of symptoms, but it varies depending on the viral load. As you're bobbing up and down, desperately trying to keep your head above water, you will flail because your entire body is filling to the brim with utter panic. You will fight the urge to breathe while submerged with all of your being, but after around 87 seconds, you will reach the breaking point. This happens when there's more carbon dioxide than oxygen in your blood, causing the chemical sensor in your brain to trigger an involuntary breath. It cannot be stopped, and you will still be conscious. This is the point where you go from voluntary apnea, which is not breathing, to involuntary. Water will fill your nostrils, and you will aspirate it into your lungs and windpipe, which will burn. It will feel like gargling lava. Once water floods your lungs, things will begin to get a little hazy. Your head will become heavy as if it's filling with hot air. This is the point where some survivors claim that things grow a little more peaceful, but remember, this is a minute and a half in. The transfer of oxygen to your blood is waning and soon it's going to halt. You'll be similar to a sinking boat slowly falling deeper and no longer able to fight. Your vital organs are being starved of oxygen, including your heart, which is killing you. On average, it takes adults around 2 minutes to lose consciousness underwater and 4 or more to die. An amoeba is a single-celled organism that can change shape and move. The Naegleria fowleri can be especially sinister if it chooses you as a host. First, they lurk in warm bodies of water or occasionally dirt. Next, they hitch an elevator ride to your brain by way of your nose. Along the way, they nestle into your olfactory nerve, your very first cranial nerve, which will throw off your sense of smell and taste. This is your first symptom. Do you think that you would notice? This creepy little critter has suction cup-like structures that it will use to basically feast on your tissue. First, it will devour your protective layer surrounding your brain and spinal cord, and then it will go deeper and deeper, all the while rapidly multiplying within you. It takes an average of 5 days from the time that you lose smell and taste for the damage to exhibit as obvious symptoms. Before I continue, just know that this infection is rare and only a handful of cases are reported each year worldwide. All of this feasting results in inflammation in your nervous system that worsens as days tick by. This will result in an unwavering headache that is rarely touched by OTC pain relievers and has been described as if a heavy rock is weighing down the head. Any kind of light will feel like gasoline on the fire, and even a candlelight might seem like bright headlights. Additionally, you'll be plagued by intense nausea and a painfully stiff neck. As the damage to your spinal cord worsens, you'll find it impossible to flex your muscles. The stiffness in your neck will invade your back and even pelvic region. Because there are now many of these organisms, they are working in tandem to also destroy deeper brain cells. A new wave of frightening symptoms will take hold. Vomiting, hallucinations, delirium, numbness, loss of bodily function, and seizures may all make an appearance. This can happen within hours or days of onset. There is treatment, but unfortunately, it rarely saves. This nasty infection carries around a 97% fatality rate. The cause of death will be from the immense pressure trapped inside of your skull. Your blood pressure will soar and your damaged brain will be forced downward, which will eventually sever the connection between your brainstem and spinal cord. This typically happens within 5 to 18 days of onset of symptoms. Imagine that something is pressing firmly against your face. Your hearing is muffled and eyes shrouded in complete darkness. You instinctively draw in a breath only to fail. It's at that moment that your entire body begins to fill with panic. This happens at first because of instinct, but as the devastating seconds tick by, it's made monumentally worse by carbon dioxide. The longer you go without fresh, reviving oxygen, the more that carbon dioxide builds up in your blood. The rising level acts as a panic stimulus. It's informing your brain that the threat of death is becoming imminent. It will send all sorts of signals to desperately try and save itself. At the same time, tiny little firecrackers are detonating beneath your skin, but you'll have bigger issues preoccupying you. Your surface blood vessels in your flesh and possibly on your lungs are rupturing due to both lack of oxygen and increase in blood pressure and heart rate. This results in a web-like rash called petechia that is a typical hallmark of suffocation deaths. Your throat will begin to burn, followed swiftly by your chest. Your head will feel like it's overheating, and soon it will even feel like your brain is pounding against your skull. You are in the early stages of an acute anoxic brain injury. At around 80 seconds, an overwhelming sensation will begin in your chest. It will feel like an unstoppable tidal wave ripping upwards until 7 seconds later when your brain triggers an involuntary breath. The carbon dioxide in your blood is too high, and it's the brain's last act of desperation. Of course, it won't work. Don't believe movie scenes because loss of consciousness does not happen swiftly. The only way that it does is if someone applies direct pressure to your carotid artery. At around 60 seconds, brain cells begin dying, and at 3 minutes, your neurons sustain severe damage. Loss of consciousness typically happens somewhere in between. Falls from all sorts of heights can be fatal, but statistically speaking, the median height that leads to fatalities is about 49 feet. That being said, one person survived a fall from over 33,000 feet. She was a sole survivor of a terrifying plane explosion. After a pained and lengthy recovery, she found herself in the Guinness Book of World Records. I hate to burst your bubble, but dying before hitting the ground is a myth that someone made up to make us feel better. It's possible to suffer cardiac arrest while falling, but that requires pre-existing conditions. Unfortunately, impact would likely come faster than death by a heart issue regardless. Honestly, a fall from 170 feet up would only take a tad over 5 seconds. Therefore, nobody dies from a fall. It's the impact that is the killer. Everybody feels the same thing in the beginning, a stomach drop sensation as you begin to rapidly plummet, but the experience becomes unique once you meet deceleration, which is also known as sudden stop to movement. Some people feel nothing beyond that because they sustain life-ending injuries immediately like a ruptured brainstem. Others experience the entirety of impact absorbed into their bodies. This kind of blunt force trauma and force can cause counter-coup injuries to the brain where it basically ricochets off of the skull, rupture to any and all organs and arteries, crumbling fractures, disconnection of the aorta from the heart, burst cells, amputated limbs, shattered skull and spine, and so much more. Another threat is penetrating wounds if you fall on a sharp or even blunt object. Whether or not you live long enough to feel this nightmare is dependent on whether any of your injuries are immediately fatal or if the brain trauma is enough to knock you unconscious. It's a fact that this is one of the most panic-inducing deaths that you can experience. There's the obvious reason, but also after oxygen is cut off, the CO2 in your blood builds up, which induces a severe impending sense of doom. That's not even the half of it. As your vision is skewed by shovel after shovel of dirt, the weight of it will cause every joint and muscle to ache. You are stuck, so suddenly you experience a nagging desire to move. The dirt weighs 75 to 110 pounds per cubic foot, 6 feet underground, and that dirt will come with a massive crushing force. As the weight builds and builds with more shovelfuls, the ache will crescendo to an electric, all-consuming crushing over every inch. Expanding your lungs is out of the question because, quite literally, the weight of an elephant is bearing down on your chest and abdomen. Not that it matters because there is no air to breathe. Dirt is shoved up your nostrils and fills your ears, it's contaminating your eyelashes, and very soon it will fill your mouth. About 87 seconds into your cutoff from oxygen, your brain will trigger an involuntary breath. It can't be stopped. You will gulp up and aspirate the acrid rust-flavored dirt. It will feel like someone shot a flamethrower down your gullet. The absolute panic will smash through any haze. You will be 100% aware of the fact that you are suffocating. By now, your rib bones are buckling under the weight, likely piercing your lungs. Finally, after 2 to 3 minutes, you slide out of this hell into unconsciousness. You're exploring a partially mapped cave. It's only partially mapped because one man died after he crawled into a winding dark tunnel that continued to get smaller and smaller until he was fully lodged. By the time that he was found, he had already suffered a long, terrifying, grueling death. You look down at your map with your headlamp and believe you found the entrance to the main tunnel, so in you go. Right at the jump, it's an adrenaline-inducing squeeze. You have to drop to your belly to shimmy inside, but this was expected. It should widen as you maneuver further in. Your vision becomes shrouded as the soles of your feet vanish inside. It's as if this cave is swallowing you whole. The little light on your head only allows you to see hazy inches ahead, but you shall soon feel relief as the bone-tight crevice expands. What you didn't expect was that you went too soon. The entrance you were looking for was farther down. The one that you're in is basically a graveyard, nicknamed the Dead Man's Chute. As you inchworm ahead, you wonder if you've screwed up. Your chest barely has the space to expand. Is it getting tighter? It's definitely getting tighter. The window of haze is shrinking. You're profusely sweating. Your tongue is going numb. You try to shimmy backwards, but you won't budge. You scream out for garbled help, but as you exhale, you can feel your rib bones lock on the cool, hard rock, hugging your bones like a vice grip. You're on a downward incline, and you swear you can hear your own blood rush to your ears and head. It's beginning to throb as you mindlessly hyperventilate. With each shallow gulp of air, your lungs begin to prickle and burn more and more. All of your saliva's pooling in your mouth, and your tongue feels engorged. You have no concept of time. It's already felt like days. You can feel your neck and face swell. A labored wet wheeze has developed deep in your chest, an indicator that you've been stuck for hours. Eventually, misleading hallucinations run wild. You dream that you're free, only to return to the maddening, squeezing darkness. A death like this happens ever so slowly by positional asphyxiation. It's possible that it could take a full day before you finally fade away.